Hey everybody, welcome to Reddit roast number 42. Mal, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Shall we dive right in? What have we got up today?
Let's go. Okay, so today we've got an applicant who has a case of the imposter syndrome, and we see that quite often in our Reddit roasts. We've also got some very short and sweet profiles, and also some profiles with incomplete info, like they don't have the demographics, some don't have their job roles. And if you want your profile to be roasted, it'd be nice to have all of that info because you'll be doing yourself a disservice if you don't.
Yeah, we can't
Really,
really roast half a profile, can we? We don't know. Okay,
yeah,
I think
we'll do
that
our best.
we'll
Yeah.
do our very best today.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dive into the first profile then, shall we?
Yeah, well, let's go. Profile review for HSW, CBS, and MIT.
Hmm.
All right. Demographic 30 male, white, US, GRE 333, 3.5 GPA in the undergrad, and a 3.95 GPA in the master's for mechanical engineering at Berkeley.
Hmm.
Work experience 6 years, currently a software engineer at a biotech. Previously was a founding engineer who turned into a tech lead at a mobility startup. Some leadership experience as he scaled the team from 1 to 40 plus. Internships, two at Apple, one at Tesla, and one at Google. So quite big names there. Post MBA goal, PM in healthcare, wants to become a founder in population scale screening. Target schools, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, Columbia, and Sloan. And it looks like OP submitted all of them in round two. So this might just be like a little sanity check for OP, for their profile. Recommenders, former VP of engineering, ex Netflix, ranks me top few of his career. That's great. CEO of previous startup as well. It's been 2 or 3 years since OP worked with them. Extracurriculars, religious community member, informal mentorship network, and was part of an undergrad engineering competition team as its president. Some context as well, left startup via RIF, which is, I think, a reduction in force, was made redundant. Will disclose this in the interview. Framed my industry change as intentional because it was. Okay, few things there. What do you think of this profile overall?
Okay, I mean, it's already submitted, so we'll skim through this fairly quickly. But I think as a sanity check, I think we can help. I think from an academic perspective, 333 is obviously a very, very high GRE score, including a perfect quant, right? 170 quant, that's amazing. Undergrad is a 3.5, which is a little bit below the 3.6 average of these target schools. They won't really care about the master's grade because not everybody has a master's, so they can't get ranked on that. But it looks like I'm reading, if I'm reading this right, the undergrad is mechanical engineering from Berkeley as well. So that's really, really nice. Now, work experience of 6 years is a pretty classic software engineering route, with a bit of all the things we see, right? Great internships at well-known tech companies. Started something, moved to tech lead role, and is now a software engineer in a biotech, one of top 25 IPOs, so a well-known brand there, probably, or at least quite a sexy company, I think, in MBA admissions. So they're going to like that from the professional side as well. I'm seeing kind of a really broad tech profile here, which is nice. In terms of extracurricular, look, member, right? Religious community member, like that's not adding much as it is. We'll see whether, maybe you can frame that, or maybe he has framed that as a more active contribution, for example, like hosting religious events, etc., creating a community, building a community. Maybe there's ways to frame that as a leadership role, but if it's just active, it's just a membership, like that's not adding a huge amount. The same with this, right? Informal mentorship network, like, so what? That's not really adding formal leadership responsibility. And then the undergrad engineering competition team, like everybody did undergrad extracurriculars, so that doesn't really count for as much either. So I'm not as impressed by the extracurriculars. I think that's probably a weakness in OP's profile. And then in terms of context, this is interesting around the reduction in force. So we're right in assuming that that is a redundancy. It doesn't have to be an issue, but we can talk maybe about how to handle that because it could be potentially a pink flag if it's handled wrongly. In terms of the goals, here, PM in healthcare to founder, I think those are really sensible goals. It's PM role is about the only thing not in his tech profile right now. So it kind of makes sense that that is a short-term post-MBA goal. And then a founder, I think that's quite a credible case for being a founder, given that he's already done it once. And yeah, I think that's, I think post-MBA goals are a very solid, no issues with those. Recommenders is both good news as well. So I think overall, we've had, I'm thinking off the top of my head, I can think of three clients in the last round or so, last couple of rounds, that have profiles like this. In other words, software engineers in big tech with lots of great internship experience. And if I remember correctly, the results of those were Harvard, and Wharton. So quite a decent, there's definitely potential with this profile to get into those schools. It'll depend, I think, on whether OP has put together a emotionally intelligent application, or whether it comes across as a bit of a sort of nerdy tech bro. That's going to be the key distinguisher for me, and yeah, we'll see.
What do you think of uh, like Harvard, Stanford, Wharton? Yes, but the other M7s, any other kind of schools that might be right for OP with this profile?
Yeah, I mean, I think OP's are focusing on them, right? Columbia and Sloan. I think with a 333 GRE and like obviously quite a good good work experience, even in a crap job market, I think OP is in quite a good position to get a good role. So I don't think OP's in a position, maybe I'm wrong, but I suspect OP's not in a position to be like, I just want to go and do an MBA. Um, I think there's a trade-off here with like salary and like, is it worth going to do it? And OP's probably thinking it's not worth it. It's not M7 and probably doesn't like the cold and doesn't want to go to Chicago. So I think the target schools are about right. I think that M7, if he did sort of lower his standards a little bit and wanted to apply to Booth and Kellogg, for example, then I think an M7 admit is, I would say not guaranteed, but it's very, very strong probability.
Okay. And speaking of that context where OP left his startup, will disclose this
Mm.
in the interview, but has framed this as an intentional shift in his application.
Mm.
What about the interviews? How can OP frame this there?
Yeah, so I think in this industry where people are moving around all the time, I don't think there's going to be a problem one way or another. I'm not worried about it. The only potential hiccup is if the Rivera background check flags up information different from what OP has said in his application. That would be a real nightmare because that would potentially light up, suggest that he was fired when actually he left or whatever, when he said he left. That could potentially be an issue. But generally, if handled correctly, being made redundant slash leaving a firm during a downsizing does not need to torpedo your applications. Happens
Mm.
all the time. The key is to A, be upfront about it, and B, frame it positively. It sounds like OP may have sort of blurred those a little bit. We'll see. But my advice generally in these cases is say that it happened, explain the reasons for it. If there is a downsizing, there's a downsizing. That's no reflection on the OP as a profile. So be transparent with that, and then also frame it as a positive. So, for example, during the 3 months ahead of the MBA, I'm not going to be working. I plan to go and explore a new market or do a like non-profit volunteering spree or just something that's productive and constructive between now and September. Um, it can come across really positively if it fits with the wider application narrative. So that's what I would say on the leaving the startup. I don't think it necessarily has to torpedo the app, but there is a strong chance if OP doesn't have any success at any of these schools, it's probably something to do with this riff and like they've discovered something that is inconsistent with what OP has said. Or they're skeptical and don't believe it. So it is a risk factor, but hopefully, if handled well, it's not going to torpedo his apps.
Okay. All right, OP, all the best for your application and
Yeah, good
interviews.
luck. Hope those go well. Get in touch for mock interviews if you do get through to the interview stages of those schools.
And we'd love to see an update post to this.
And we'd love
Yeah.
to see an update. Even feel free to send us a DM and let us know how it went. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Should we move on to the
Okay.
next profile, Mal?
Yes, let's do that.
Cool.
Chances at HBS and Sloan. Okay, very short profile, really quick. Berkeley has an engineering, electrical engineering and computer science plus data science degree with a 3.5 GPA, graduated with honors, 2 summer analyst internships at a large investment bank, 780 GMAT, 5 years of experience, all of them at a large tech company with 2 promotions. This is a FANG company, and reported to the CTO and the CSO as well, high impact projects there. Lived and worked in 4 US cities, NGO leadership experience in women's rights and reproductive health. Not interested in VC or PE. Looking to start my own firm that builds technology for maternal health, motivated from my upbringing and childhood experiences. I know there's not a lot there to go off of, but what is your on this profile?
You
Or
covered most of the key things I'm looking for. Let's start academically. So 3.5 GPA is okay. It's nothing outstanding. 3.6 is the average of Harvard and Sloan thereabouts. So not a train wreck on the academics on the grades, but not outstanding either. In terms of GMAT 780. Now that really compensates for it. I think a 780 will take your profile will be taken seriously by any M7 with that GMAT score. And so academically, I think it's fair to say, strong. Demographic. My inkling on this is that OP is a woman in tech. Is it just based on this narrative? Now, if that is the case, then I think it's fair to say OP, from a demographics perspective, is a underrepresented, and has sort of some quite interesting life experience that would add to the perspectives of the classroom. So I like that from a demographic perspective. Extracurricular, look, we don't need lines and lines and lines about it. That one line is telling us that she has some really serious extracurricular leadership experience, and the schools will love that. Not only is it powerful, it's also directly aligns with what OP is talking about doing in their post MBA role, and that is an admissions consultant's dream, because what I'd love to do is create a story that leads into that career narrative, and that'd be fantastic. Professional, FANG, obviously the brand, very strong brands and great internships as well there. Promotions to show for hard work, good work ethic, and good experience. So professionally, it sounds like progress and impact, which is incredible. And I think the highlight for me on this is the goals. OP has got this very clear goal of building starting my own firm that builds technology for this specific area of maternal health, motivated from my upbringing. So a really, really nice and unique goal that the schools will love. So overall, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton for sure, Sloan for sure, rest of the M7 also very, very plausible.
okay. All right. And do you think with like HBS and Sloan, what kind of narrative angle can OP take?
I mean, speaking very broadly, when we're working with HBS clients, we like to focus on the leadership angle in their HBS application, aided by the fact that they have their leadership essay B. They've got the recommenders also asked questions along leadership lines as well. So we kind of lean into the leadership side. And I think for OP, that's probably this leadership experience in women's rights, and maybe whether the promotions lead to some sort of direct managerial experience. Those are probably the two topics that I'd want to explore for Harvard. On the Sloan side, they really focus on, they want people who are best in class. At whatever it is
Yeah.
you're doing, they want best in class. And so I would focus on using that cover letter like a greatest achievement essay, and maybe highlight a relevant project in those during that time at a FANG. Highlight a project that's really relevant and impactful, and use that to demonstrate being best in class. So that's how I would do it with those two schools. I think the both of them will like this women's rights and reproductive health. I think I'd probably lean into it a little bit more with Harvard, because they explicitly ask, in fact, twice, what do you want to do after the MBA? MIT don't have that train of thought. They don't have any questions that are forward looking, for example. So that's sort of how I would distinguish them. And I think OP has a good chance at these.
Right. And I see that OP's goal is to start their own firm, and we typically kind of keep entrepreneurship as a longer term goal for applicants. So, given this narrative, what could
Mm,
be the reproductive health and women's rights narrative?
yeah,
Be
it's a
a
good
good short term goal.
Good question. I think OP, at very high level, simply speaking, OP is well positioned to break into this, to do this, to set up their own firm. Um, it would be first time founder experience from what I can see, but that's not necessarily the end of the world. Where I think OP's gap is this maternal health industry experience, right? So OP seems to have the functional experience and the FANG with this FANG work, so can do the building, but doesn't have a network experience in maternal health. So for me, it's certainly for the narratives perspective. Now, obviously, in the real world, do whatever you want, but we just got to get you into the profile, well, into the class. What I would do is for the short term goal, I would say I'm going to build my experience and my network and skills in maternal health tech. And so my short term goal would be something like a PM at Maven Clinic, for example, which is a first femtech unicorn. I found that a little bit earlier, did a bit of Googling, a bit of searching, and found that. So that's PM role in that industry. That's a very achievable post MBA role. And then the long term goal, let's say like 3 to 5 years afterwards, then you set up the startup, or at least that's what you tell the schools. Again, once you graduate, if you haven't got any debt and you just want to go and start your thing, go for it, do it. The schools aren't going to stop you. But just in terms of the narrative, that might look like quite a bit of a stretch. And so maybe having a short-term goal that gives you industry experience would be a good strategy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I think that's all for this profile. Shall we move on?
Okay, let's do it.
Profile 3. Okay, so just thought I'd reach out and inquire about my chances of getting into T25 school based on my work experience alone, since I'm currently studying for the GMAT, so hasn't given GMAT yet. But due to the vast number of people who seem to be working MBB or FANG, I feel like a nobody in comparison. Ooh, I see this imposter syndrome creeping in. I don't think I have any chances, any of my accomplishments being dwarfed by those aforementioned. But yeah, OP could use a third person perspective, and that's what we're here to give. Some stats: average state school, graduated with a computer science degree with a 3.3 GPA. Prior enlisted in the military, joined at 17, has about 4 years of experience there. Currently it was a data analyst, then was a database analyst, and now is a data engineer. My why. I'm tired of working in the public sector and I want to pivot into the private industry. OP's goals are to be a strategy consultant or a product manager or something along the lines of corporate strategy or sales. It seems like OP was working for a lot of contracting companies in the public industry, but just think there's a lot of red tapeism and office politics. Unfortunately, I'm also in a very high cost of living area and only getting paid around 80K. Don't get sick days, work 60 hours without overtime, and I dislike my job. So, and yeah, so that kind of explains OP's jumps that he's had to make in the past. Yeah, there's some questions there, but we'll get to those. What do you think overall?
Be brutally honest, he says. Right, well, let's do it. Okay, academically, 3.3 is a bit meh. Where was it? Is that written? Yeah, here. 3.3. It's not ideal. 3.6, the average of the M7. Not going to be a deal breaker for T25, but not ideal. The GMAT will therefore do a lot of lifting, right? OP, the way I see your profile, like it almost entirely hinges now on the GMAT. You've There's not that much else you're going to change. So really, really focus on getting that GMAT score between now and September. I think that's going to be super important. Okay, in terms of demographic, I'm not sure either. I think, yeah, I mean, I'm not here. I'm not seeing anything about being an underrepresented applicant. I'm going to assume overrepresented, unfortunately, but I'm not sure on that one. Same with the extracurriculars. I don't see any, as far as I can see. So that could be a red flag because there aren't any, or it could just be that OP didn't feel like mentioning them, in which case maybe there is something there. But again, I feel like if they were doing something meaningful in extracurriculars, then it would probably be included here. So a bit of a worry on that one. Professional, like this is strong. A data focus, really some quite clear kind of progress. Not entirely clear whether these are all within the same firm or same public sector entity, but I'm going to assume they are, and that they are promotions, not just moves, and therefore quite clear progression professionally and in quite a nice space, right? Data analysts, and particularly if you can point to the impact that your data analytics had, that can be quite a nice narrative and could be quite, and schools are going to quite like that. It's quite a sexy theme. Now, in terms of goals, like pivoting from the public sector to the private sector makes perfect sense. It's a classic post MBA goal for public sector workers. But the problem is on the goals, you're going to have to be way more specific. This absolutely screams somebody who has no idea what they're doing in terms of goals, right? Working as a strategy consultant or product manager, like those are completely different roles, or sales, again, a completely different role. So, OP, you've got to get your act together on the goals. Just because you're in the government and you look over at the public sector and think, oh, that's public sector, that's a thing. Within the public sector, there are really serious distinctions, and very few people do all of these different roles within a private sector career. So you really need to draw that distinction and figure out which one it is that you find interesting, and double down on it. But any one of them individually could work. So if you focus on corporate strategy, go for it, do it. Focus on your entire application around corporate strategy, that'll be fine. Or sales, or strategy consulting, but choose one. In terms of overall, right, not I wouldn't say you're a nobody, as you put down. I feel like a nobody in comparison. I think that's a bit harsh. But I do think there's a little bit more work to be done, particularly on the goals, and on the GMAT as well. And I think what I'd like to see is that with a good GMAT score and a bit of maybe guidance on the goals, OP is genuinely excited about this move. There's a bit of a negative tone around this. My life's a bit shit right now. Well, with an exciting narrative that really hits home and feels genuine and authentic, hopefully you go into the MBA application quite excited about your prospects. And if you can get to that point, then it's a really good sign that you've come up with a good application. So that's how I would view this profile. Has potential, but not there yet.
Okay, and what are OP's chances? OP's targeting T25. So what are his chances there?
T25 is a pretty broad list. And I would say GMATs pending and narrative dependent, chances of T25 are strong, maybe even with a decent scholarship. I mean, bottom of T25, yeah, you can get a 325, 328 type GRE score. If you're doing, is he doing GMAT or GRE? Doing GMAT, right? So something like a 655 or thereabouts would be nice. Then I think you're in a great position to get T25 for sure. And I think using that using that MBA and the pre-MBA application process to pivot into something you genuinely find interesting and exciting is definitely if I was a life coach or something, that's what I'd be saying to do.
Fair. So OP, this isn't OP's only post. While I was doing my Reddit
Stalking.
searching, yes, stalking, I saw that OP did have another one in which his job is a bit more just clear. So yeah, we've got that post here.
It's here.
Yeah. And yeah, OP is again, this is another question about his military and engineering work experience and how to bridge that.
Yeah.
So I think the question that I can get out of this is that I'm not sure how to quantify myself as someone who went, from enlisted military to college to data analyst to data engineer. And what kind of narrative with that background
Mhm.
would work for OP?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think what I would generally look to be doing is to either combine personal and professional, so personal interests and professional work. On the example we just gave on the profile before about the reproductive health candidate, taking their FANG experience and applying it to an industry that really matters to them personally. Now, that in this case could be very doable. We don't really know what OP's extracurriculars are. It's a bit difficult to gauge that. But it does look like they have certainly military experience, if not maybe some ongoing military sort of volunteering type work. And in that case, combining tech, data analytics, and the military and going down that route would be a very logical application narrative in the eyes of the AdCom. For example, there are lots and lots of private sector companies doing data analytics for the military, right?
Yeah.
That would be a logical post MBA role that might even be quite exciting. You could be in the public sector, sorry, the private sector, doing work contracted to the public sector. Basically, you would be these people that you have met that he talks about. So he talks about I've worked yeah, contracting companies in the public industry. While I've met great many people, much red taping. So if he was basically moving to the other side of the fence here, moving to the private sector where you're doing occasionally contract work, for example, at McKinsey Shape, right? Lots of the work will be for the government, but you'll also be involved as a generalist in private sector. So I think doing a role that engages both the data analytics and OP's genuine interests or towards the military, I think is a really good fit there. Or certainly in the eyes of the school, that would make sense. Now, if again, this is your narrative, this is not what you're not tying yourself to this, but I think that would make a lot of sense.
Okay. Okay, great. I think we've looked at this profile thoroughly,
Cool.
and I hope we've allayed some of your imposter syndrome, OP.
Yeah, go for it. Go for
Yeah.
it. T25 is definitely within reach.
All right. And let's do our last profile of today.
Mm.
Uh, 28 years old male reapplicant.
Mhm.
Um, Asian, not from India or China, applying at the M7 schools, 7 years of experience in matriculation, Big Four financial due diligence across four territories, two accelerated promotions, and strong LORs from directors. Studied accounting from a Russell Group University. I don't see a GPA in there. Uh, Chartered accountant from the UK, CFA level 1 completed. GRE 325, 165 quant, 160 verbal, and the post MBA goal is investment banking. So we worked on some of the largest M&A deals in infrastructure and energy across North America, Europe, and the Middle East, North Africa region. Goal is to pivot to IB, focusing on infrastructure. And we are seeing a lot more infra applicants nowadays, aren't we?
For sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, what's your overall take on? I know there's a bit missing here. I don't see a GPA. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not seeing any
Hard to
extra.
go academically. I'm going to assume. Okay, so Russell Group is basically the sort of
Mhm.
top-ish batch of colleges in the UK, which is a fairly good thing. But we don't, as you say, we don't have a GPA, so bit in the dark on that. Doesn't sound like OP's been particularly, hasn't it doesn't struggle academically from just
Mhm.
judging from the rest of the profile, but that grade will matter. And so on the UK, in UK speaking, I'd like a 2-1 or higher, which is kind of aligned with about a 3.4, 3.5 or so GPA UK US style. Um, 325 is again fairly meh. Good, still sort of decent quant score, 165 out of 70, but that verbal score is not great. So 325 is all right, but it's not knocking any lights out. And also maybe supported by a bit by OP. It looks like OP might not be English mother tongue. Not entirely sure, but if that's the case, it gets maybe a little bit of leeway on the verbal side. But still, academics, meh. Demographic, maybe slightly underrepresented if Asian, but not India, China. Again, it'll depend a lot on where that is, but and also depend on the visa situation of that particular country. Within Asia, not India, China, there's vastly different visa prospects particularly for US schools for the US and OP is targeting M7, so that will be a factor. OP is also on the older side. Oh no, 28 male. So no. I think maybe just graduated young, perhaps, but 7 years experience of matriculation is on the slightly higher side. Now, extracurriculars, we have no idea. Now, what I'm concerned about is that there aren't any, and that would explain why OP might go some way towards explaining why OP is a reapplicant. There's lots and lots of essays, particularly M7 essays, that are very, very difficult to write if you have no extracurricular experience. And I wonder if maybe OP's fall into that trap. Unsure. Professional. Now, from an like the undergrad, the chartered accountant side, and the accounting. So the first part of OP's profile is pretty unglamorous, right? Accounting, really accounting heavy, but has started to pick up in this M&A due diligence particularly in infrastructure, which is quite a hot sector at the moment. So I think OP's professional profile is where he is strongest. Um, Based on that, the accelerated promotion is also really nice. Make sure that comes through clearly, OP, in your resume. Make sure you break down your current role by your current company by roles separately so that we can see immediately the promotions when glancing at your resume. And I think for this applicant, investment banking goals make perfect sense, right? I'm always quite having gone through MBA, grad programs at two investment banks. I am often quite cynical about people who say they want to break into investment banking. And I say, you need to have hardcore finance experience. Well, what's hardcore finance experience? It's chartered accountant, it's CFA level one, and it's M&A due diligence at a big four. Like, this is a classic example of someone who has the hardcore finance experience that you need to break into investment banking. So I think the goals and the professional narrative are the strength here. Um, so overall, I would say solid, but there are some really big unknowns that are going to basically make or break the difference for M7. Is your GPA strong? If yes, M7 possibly. If not, it's going to be really, really tough. How much has changed about your profile as a reapplicant? Because the mistake so many people make, and I think one of the geniuses described this as insanity. It's like doing the same thing again and hoping for a different result. It's insane. If OP's application has changed dramatically and improved dramatically as a reapplicant, then maybe with exactly the right narrative and a good GPA, then M7 is on the cards. But actually, like, just GRE alone, as somebody who studied in the UK and is fairly quanty in your work, a 325 is not particularly strong GRE, and especially going up against the investment bankers who are going
Yeah.
to, who OP is really kind of in the crosshairs of, both the investment bankers and the big four consultants. A 325 is not ideal. So actually, I'm kind of thinking, from if it was just a professional application, I would say yes. But the fact that the GPA is not there and the GRE's
Mhm.
fairly low, actually, I'm not excited about M7. I think it's unlikely.
Okay, so what can OP do then to improve his profile?
Well, the
Should
big thing
OP
is,
retake the jury?
as a reapplicant, I mean, yeah, if that is the first, if that's a GRE score you applied with before, then definitely got to take that again. That's not high enough really for M7 given your profile. The second thing is the is on the extracurricular side. We don't have any here, and I wonder if it's because of the same usual this trap we see and the typical challenge we see with people in finance. They don't have any extracurriculars. They don't
Yeah.
have any because they're working, they ain't beasted 60-hour weeks, whatever. Maybe their kind of early in life value set has been focused around financial independence and they're throwing everything into their work, right? This was me 5 years ago, like 10 years ago. Like, I get it. But the schools don't want to hear that. The schools want to
Mhm.
see that you're the kind of person that's going to get involved in your community. And that could also be something that was missing from the last application. And if that's the case, then some really decent extracurricular experience over the next few months would really help. And obviously, starting something new is going to be difficult in that time. So ideally, taking something you're already doing and building it up and giving yourself a title so you can put it in your resume, etc. Um, then the other thing is formal leadership responsibilities. Now, this could come via the extracurriculars, but it
Mhm.
could also come via another promotion. I don't know. It's hard to say exactly what level OP is at right now, but he's certainly around the point where he might be managing people.
Mhm.
And a promotion that takes him from an individual contributor to a manager of others would also be a big, well, almost a game changer for this profile, because all of a sudden you've got a leadership story that you can use, which I don't think OP has otherwise. So that's the other thing. It's not so much something that OP can just do in the next few months, but if it does
Yeah.
happen, it will be a benefit.
Okay. I think we can wrap up this profile. We've answered all of the questions that
Excellent.
we had seen. But speaking of investment banking, our bonus is really germane to that topic. Struck out in IB recruiting. So I'm in an MBA program at a top 10 school, and I went through the rigorous IB fall recruiting and got to first round with three firms and then Super Day with just one, and I didn't get it. I have no idea why I got dropped from the others pre-Super Day. Sam, you're going to have to explain to me what Super Day is because I
Yeah.
felt like I did well in all of my interviews. I feel like the peers I know that did get top jobs all had someone they were close to already working there. So Sophie thinks this is a nepotism thing happening. I'm bummed because I really did want to do IB, but now that it's off the table, I don't know how to proceed to get an internship this summer. For context, I'm a first year and I spent all fall in IB recruiting, and now it's January and I'm looking for an internship this summer in finance.
Yeah, interesting problem to face. Not unusual either. So I would say, so the first thing is, well, I mean, I've had several clients this happen to, because of my investment banking background. After working with them in admissions consulting and getting them into the program, they got in touch to say, "Hey, Sam, I'm struggling with breaking into investment banking, like I did a few years ago." And they are one of the things that they often have in common is not much in the way of network in finance. And as you alluded to there, this idea of like it's a bit nepotistic. I think it goes a bit beyond that. I think if you're these banks now are actively fighting against nepotism, and just having like an uncle who's on on the trading desk or whatever is not on its own going to get you in. In fact, what it would do is it would get you the interview, but it wouldn't necessarily get you the conversion of the interview. And that's not OP's problem. OP had three interviews and didn't get any of them. So it's more about using that network to kind of learn to speak the language and learn to get your get an insider understanding of what um, the investment banks are doing. So let me give you an example of this. When I was interning at Bank of America Merrill Lynch, it took me a long time to understand the names of the different desks. Right? It took me like 2 or 3 weeks to figure out the names of the different desks that I was rotating. One of them was called rates, and one of them was called credit, if I get it right. I think it was that. Now, effectively the same thing, right? One of them is government bonds, which is rates. The other one is corporate bonds, which is credit. And I was like, no, why don't they just call them corporate bonds? Why don't they call them government bonds? There are reasons for this, and they go back, and it's cultural, and different banks call it different things. But for the first 3 weeks of my internship, I didn't know what the different desks were called. Now, if you can kind of get ahead in that, have those initial really early learning conversations with somebody who is at the firm,
Yeah.
that ask the dumb questions to somebody who's already at the firm, those are the kinds of things that show up in an interview at a super day. You're speaking the language. You're referring to the rates desk, not the corporate bond desk, for example, which is a mistake that I probably made. Now, your other question was so that explains why having somebody in the bank, in the system, helps, that you can ask and speak to and sort of have them coach you. But okay, so specifically answering your super day question, basically these are days where they fly everybody in, they do a whole bunch of interviews, information sessions, group tasks, and at the end of the day, some people get offers and some people don't. And it's quite brutal, but at the same time, it's quite an effective way of, it's one day, you just carve out one day and you get your answer, as opposed to like, I think MBB interview processes, which can last multiple days, in fact, weeks, multiple cases, different partners, blah, blah, blah. It's actually quite an efficient way of doing it. So um, that's on the super day piece. Now, my advice then generally here is as I look at this situation, the first one is to be persistent. I don't think that OP is at the point now where they should yet be like crossing off investment banking for their entire career. You're still early, but it does look like the investment banking internships are off the table this year. So what are you going to do in the near future? Basically, I would look for the short term, in other words, the next two internship, maybe post MBA role, and a couple of years afterwards. Look at other industries. Industries that are classic in this situation. One of them is, boutique investment banking. So these super days and kind of, I think what it looks like the process OP's gone through is the bulge bracket banks. These are the big banks that have thousands of applicants and everybody wants to be in New York at a bulge bracket. And Because somebody somewhere has told them that's a good thing and that means you've succeeded. And I fell for this as well, hook, line, and sinker. That was sort of glamorized, and they're not necessarily better. They really aren't. The hours suck, blah blah blah. So the first thing to do is to look at smaller banks in other cities. So they call them boutique investment banks. Now, boutique investment banks tend to be more advisory because they're smaller. They don't have trading arms. So there isn't the kind of global markets side. And therefore, the clients tend to not be listed companies. And so you just get, it's a smaller, more advisory focused role, a bit more akin to consulting, for example. So that would be one option. The other is sector specific strategy. So two roles that are kind of, or one, a role that's quite similar to investment banking is and actually liaises often quite directly with the investment banks, is the corporate strategy desk within a, for example, a Fortune 500 company. A strategy desk at the Fortune 500 company are going to think, it'd be nice to acquire this competitor. And they're going to call JP Morgan, or there'll be connections to JP Morgan, and JP Morgan will say, yeah, we can help you raise the capital to do that and make the acquisition, blah, blah, blah. And those will be the counterparts. So it's not directly investment banking, but you're working with the investment bankers and doing lots of the same work. So that would be an interesting backup kind of route
Mhm.
as well, which could ultimately lead to investment banking a little bit later, a little bit further down the line. Another one is private equity. Now, this is less common and difficult to break into without pre-existing investment banking experience, as we've talked about at length. But people do get into private equity without investment banking experience. It has been done, and that should be on the cards and something that OP could certainly apply to with a top 10 MBA. The final one that's sort of linked to private equity is VC and asset management. Very similar skills to investment banking. Lots of people go from one to the other. Um, it's very, very common, particularly the kind of, if you're doing rates at an investment bank and you move to a bond fund like PIMCO, those people, those are kind of the same people going back and forth between those two roles. VC is a little bit more kind of small and adventurous and a bit more startup-y. But again, lots of the same valuation skills, it's a network, etc. So plenty of other options that are kind of parallel and adjacent to this role in investment banking that have that use lots of the same skills, open up lots of the same doors further down the line, but that aren't actually investment banking. So that would be my advice to OP. Don't give up. Those are your options. Crack on.
All right. Okay. I think that'll give OP a pretty good place to start. Should we go
Hope
through
so.
the comments a little bit and see
Yeah, let's do it.
what everyone's saying?
Let's do it. So there's this one comment that seems to be at the very much upvoted at the top. We touch on that one.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, some banks, okay, point one seems like the biggest mistake you can make is to give up. Like you said, stay persistent.
Hmm.
Um, don't give up. Email your group, talk to your friends, see if seats are opening up.
Yeah.
Point two is about recruiting still open till March.
And the
Um,
boutiques angle as well.
yeah.
Emailing the boutique firms. That's sort of what I was saying. Summer internship in something related. And these corporate
Mhm.
strategy roles that I mentioned are also included in here. And then the other aspect, I think, IPO support work. So this is like
Yeah.
that big four due diligence applicant we were just talking about previously. Um, yeah, a couple of applicants ago was the financial due diligence candidate. That's basically what OP is, what this commenter is saying to go and do. And another idea is pivoting to MBB and then go. Now, the problem with that is that consulting recruiting happens even earlier than IB. So the internships for recruiting for consulting for this year will be off the table. So I'm not sure that's plausible at the moment. But basically, anything that is structured is likely done by now, but anything that is unstructured likely still has space and is on the card. So that's really just IB and consulting are off the table. Everything else is probably fair game.
Okay. All the best, OP, for your
Cool.
recruiting.
Awesome. Okay, I think that's all of our profiles today. Mal,
Yeah.
thank you very, very much for trawling the depths of Twitter of
Yeah.
Reddit to find all of those. Really appreciate it. And if you've watched this and you enjoyed watching us roast, feel free to send over your profile to be roasted. Feel free to get in touch via samweeks.com if you're considering hiring an admissions consultant. We're currently taking on round 3 and round 1 next year's clients. And like and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to watch more people getting their hopes and dreams burned by Sam and Mal, and sometimes John, who sometimes joins us.
All right. See you
Great
next week.
stuff. See you next week.